Welcome to the Film Florida podcast. I'm John Lux, and I'm the Executive Director of Film Florida. Before we get to our interview, please remember to subscribe, rate, and review the Film Florida podcast. If you're not already a member of Film Florida, please consider joining at filmflorida.org. If you like what you hear on the podcast, please consider going to our website and donating $20.23 for our 2023 fundraising campaign. We also have a Film Florida merchandise page. Visit filmflorida.creator-spring.com to purchase Film Florida t-shirts, sweatshirts, coffee mugs, and more. Mo Fitzgibbon is a Grammy Award nominated writer, producer, and director. Mo's projects include broadcast television in biographies, documentaries, varieties, national commercials, and music specials, both in English and Spanish. Her company, Walker Fitzgibbon TV Film, was founded in South Florida and has worked with many well-known entertainers like Gloria Estefan, Shakira, Andy Garcia, Jon Secada, and many others. We talk about her early acting career. Mo shares lots of stories, gives advice to up-and-coming industry professionals, and more on this episode of the Film Florida podcast. Here's my conversation with Mo Fitzgibbon. Welcome to the Film Florida podcast, Mo.
Nice to be here.
So what's your origin story? Where'd you come from?
Well, I'm a Florida girl, born and raised. I was a surfer girl, skateboarder girl, sunshine girl, without dating myself, of course, at a time when there just weren't very many skateboard girls doing handstands on skateboards, right? Imagine that. But there was a photo taken of me with the Associated Press of me doing this handstand on a skateboard that went around the world in newspapers. At the time, newspapers were everything.
Mm-hmm.
And that photograph was all over the world. It would be on the cover. And there was this little side photo of a girl on a skateboard on her hands with white blonde hair and a white bikini with a seashell necklace. And there I was, perfectly poised, toes were pointed, and that went everywhere. I mean, honestly, when people ask, how did I get in the business? Well, that's how I got in the business. So a very famous casting director, you may know her, Dee Miller.
Sure.
She was a Florida pioneer. She used to oversee all of the casting and the production for Birdine's commercials, which were directed by another great Florida director, Bert Dubois. And, they were looking for a girl who could skateboard. And word got out in town, and somebody said, well, I saw this girl skateboarding in a newspaper clipping, and I don't know how they actually got to me, but somehow they did. And I'll never forget it. My mother was very excited. She was kind of a stage mother, but, during those days, people did not get in the business to be like crazy people. They just loved the whole thing about entertainment. And so she would always scold me about the skateboard. And sure enough, this was the way that it began. So yeah. Oh my gosh, they want a girl on a skateboard. We have to go to this lady, Dee Miller. And I think I was 14 at the time. Yeah, 14 or 15. And that was my first job, skateboarding upside down.
And how far did your on-camera acting career go?
Well, it went on well into my mid-30s, actually. But that is how I got started doing commercials for advertisers, national commercials like Nabisco and Burger King, and of course, Birdine's. And then I went on to do small parts in movies. And of course, during that time in Florida, in South Florida, in the 80s, there was so much television series going off, feature films. And even prior to that, up into my later teens, I remember doing, I think it was Porky's, Ace Ventura. I mean, I have been in a lot of movies, okay, believe it or not. I actually have a speaking part in Miami Vice. So, yeah. So I continued that up through my 30s. Yes.
And then how did you transition? Because in the mid-90s, 1990s, you made a name for yourself as a production coordinator and a line producer. So how did that transition happen?
Well, the beautiful part of the business, so to speak, is you can begin somewhere that's remotely whatever your intention or you thought you would be. Oh, I'm going to be an actress. But yet it was that very day that I was doing that handstand on the skateboard and upside down, I'm looking at the feet and bodies of grips and gaffers and cables and a dolly. And I'm thinking, wow, that really excited me. That really inspired me to know more about it. So while I was a teen, I started working behind the scenes in still photography. My brother had a small production company. He used to photograph sailboats and sailors in Coconut Grove, Florida. And I would go along with him and I was his assistant. And that's really how I got started. And all the way up through, I would say around 20 years old, I got a job at an ad agency. And I started just gathering up whatever was necessary for commercials. And I knew how to do that because I had already been working on set in commercials as an actor and also experiencing that time with my brother working in photography. And I loved it. I mean, it was everything. Why? Because it just made sense. Everything made sense to me. I'd love to decorate, I'd love to make rooms look pretty. I guess us gals, we have kind of a knack for this stuff. No offense, right? But it was just wonderful to be a part of the crew. And I started working at every level, from in the real business, in the real place of delivery, to broadcast, where we received a script, we broke it out. And this was from the agency level. So this wasn't from a production company level.
Mm-hmm.
So I was on the other side before I was in production. And I think that's why I totally got it as a production company, because I knew what the demand was on the other side. So yeah. So that's how I got started. I worked at an ad agency in Peoria, Illinois.
Nice.
The Florida girl. She moved to the land of 8-foot snowbanks. That was pretty wild to be from Florida, living in Peoria, but it was really the beginning of everything for me in the business, knowledge-wise.
Well, and then you started as an actor and then an industry professional, and then you created your own company, Walker Fitzgibbon TV and Film. What made you decide that you wanted the responsibility and stress of being a small business owner?
Well, after I had returned back from the Midwest, I hit the streets running. I got a job at an agency, a top agency at the time known as the Ad Team. They were producing about 150 commercials a month.
Wow.
Everything from talking head to full throttle lifestyle, Lennar Homes, J. Byron's, huge national accounts, Party City, Office Depot. And there I was doing what I knew how to do, which was line up these productions on an internal level at an agency that wanted to be, that agency was a production company.
Mm-hmm.
So they had their own people in their own production company within the ad agency. And it was there that I learned how to do budgets. It was there that I learned how to work with casting directors. It was there that I learned how to find the right directors, even though I was directing, but I still wasn't getting that credibility as a director within the agency yet. It'd be like, okay, you build the foundation, you bring it to life. Here's the production book. Someone else is going to oversee that.
Yeah.
So I felt like there I was, really just holding up this massive production department and not getting the credit, not getting paid equally. So I took my sick days that I acquired over a long period of time. I incorporated my business in 1989. I hate to date it, but that's when I did it. And I worked at the same time, and I took those sick days and I built my director's reel and I knocked on everybody's door and I incorporated Fitzgibbon Inc. at the time, all by myself. It didn't really cost a lot of money to incorporate, but it was a big endeavor in the sense of, like, I had no idea. maybe that was the reason why, I had no idea what I was getting into. I think sometimes if you have no fear, you just do it,
Hmm.
you're not afraid. When you overthink, or when you just get yourself in trouble this way. So I was fearless. And that is how I launched Fitzgibbon Inc. in 1989.
And then after you started the company, you took a really active role in South Florida's film and television community. Talk about that.
Well, the industry was it was amazing. The South Florida production industry at that time was booming. Not only did we have the features that would come in, or the series, we were getting a boatload of business from Europe.
Hmm.
So these production entities would produce for other people. When I started producing commercials with Ridley Scott and Spike Jonze, I knew that this business was very lucrative. I mean, the budgets that we were getting at the time, they could average between 500,000 and 700,000. So you would have to create basically a movie for 700,000 for 30 seconds. So that was like having a $20 million movie. So learning all of that side of it, working with a production company like that, working at the ad agency level, that's really why I said, this is for me. I want to run my shop. I want to be the director of my shop. I want to oversee the editing. I want to have a voice. And I felt like my voice wasn't heard, even as a top producer at an ad agency. It wasn't heard like it should have been heard. So I took those sick days. I built a director's reel. I spec'd out commercials, and I knocked on every door. And my first client was the Miami Beach Chamber of Commerce.
Mm.
And this was pre the Deco explosion. This is right at the top of 91. And I mean, South Beach didn't even look like South Beach in 1991. But
Right.
you had Michelle Palmier, you had Ellen Jacobi casting, you had all this beautiful Ocean Drive, the magazine. It was just really the most magical place ever. And when they offered me the position of directing and writing the tourism film for Miami Beach, that's when it all began for me, both on the promotional side of filming in Florida and supporting Florida and all the beautiful places in it. So it was that client and that job that got the party started. And besides, while I was doing that, I had already become a member of Women of the Motion Picture Industry. We were lacking production union of sorts. So AICP was in the works for the Florida chapter. I also did a tourism film with a bunch of people, Chuck Eldred, Elizabeth Wentworth, and the entire Florida community from Gainesville to Key West. We made this documentary called Film in FLA, because Florida would not be FL, it would be FLA. So the
Hmm.
whole hook was LA, no, FLA, right? And so that's how it opened. And that took actually a Fort Lauderdale Film Festival award that Peter Bogdanovich awarded to me. This was when the Fort Lauderdale Film Festival was like Cannes in Florida, literally. And that is really when I just got into things on a more social level, more political, community related.
Now, in the 1990s, you also started to build a really meaningful relationship with Gloria and Emilio Estefan, who are Film Florida legends, by the way. Talk about your relationship with the Estefans.
My partner, Robert W. Walker, is very well known. He was the great Robert W. Walker on Y100 Radio. He built Y100 Radio and other radio stations in South Florida. And he played her first record. So he
Mm.
broke her as an artist, and he hired a young man by the name of Frank Amadeo. And Frank Amadeo, after leaving the radio station, he was a phone turkey, and he rose up at all levels after Rob left. And he got a job overseeing Gloria and Emilio Estefan's media company. This was in 1993.
Hmm.
So Rob and he spoke and he said, well, you've got to meet Mo because she will make the mountain move if you need to make it move. And so they brought me in to do their first, what we called back then an EPK, electronic press kit, for the release of Matiera, which was the Latin album. It was the first time they were going to break ground with that. There was also her first Christmas album, which is so unique because even today they just produced one 30 years later. I mean, that's how far we go back. And so that relationship began at that moment. And we went on to do many great things for them for 17 years, multi-language projects, troop specials, HBO specials. I wrote the Lifetime Intimate Portrait story on her for Lifetime Television, which was the beginning of the musical On Your Feet. They literally took the intimate portrait and made that the foundation of what that was going to become, which was an honor. But you just never know. You could do something 20 years ago and it could be reflushed out and become a Broadway musical, a hit Broadway musical. So we had a wonderful journey. I had an incredible relationship. It is a tough place to hang out in. You're working with A-level people from all over the world. And these folks they are humble. I mean, I wouldn't say that film business is made up of a bunch of humble people, but when you have worldwide recognition, the lifestyle that you lead, the traveling, the tours, people screaming your name out, watching all of that, watching hundreds of hours of videos while they're on tour in Spain, seeing the moments where a fan latches on to a person crying and telling them, thank you, you changed my life. I mean, be in that and watch that was so special. And I think when you're there a long time, 17 years, well, there's a reason for that because you have such a rapport. It's not always perfect because I'm not the kind of person that's going to agree with everything. May get me in trouble, but at the same time, it keeps my position safe with them because they know that I will give them the real on everything. Even though I love you and you're the biggest star in television and you're super loaded, I'm just the person here to bring attention to every level of it so you understand, how it's looking on the other side. And I think that kind of trust is important. And I would say that time with them, I received a Grammy nomination on a Gloria Estefan project. That was one of the first DVDs of its time. So that's hanging on the wall. Yeah.
Now, Mo, you've also spent time in California. When did you move there and why did you go out there?
Well, California, Hollywood. So I felt here I was in Miami. I had an amazing ride. I'm billing $2 million a year. I've got beautiful offices in Bell Harbor. I have Emilio and Gloria Estefan as my client. I'm married. I just had a kid. This is perfect. And my husband and partner looked at me and he said, I'm being considered for a huge job with CBS in radio, overseeing radio stations throughout the country for CBS. He said, you should have been out in LA years ago, but we hung out here. We raised his son and it was beautiful. And the business was booming. We had a huge studio in North Miami Beach, right next to Criteria. I don't know if you knew that. It was Airwave. It was a very well-known. Dave Mason used to record in there. I mean, it goes back deep with the BG scene, but his reputation in radio, Robert W. Walker, is tremendous in the audio world. He wrote records, he made records with folks. So we went and we're standing on the corner of Burton Way in Beverly Hills. And he said, I don't think I'm going to take the radio job. And I'm like, what do you mean? What? No, he said, but we're going anyway, because I've always wanted to be here. You wanted to sell movies here and get in the game. You have to hunt where the ducks are. So let's just do it. We'll just come back and forth and we'll be bi-coastal and nothing will change. We'll just create another location. And literally within 60 days of that date, an 18-wheeler came down the street and loaded up the Beverly Hillbillies, or the Southern Hillbillies, and we landed in a rental there with employees and people and rolled out Walker Fitzgibbon TV film in Los Angeles while I was continuing to go back and forth in Florida. We were working with agencies in Palm Beach at the time, the Palm Beach Community College campaign for prepaid college. We were doing Hospital, St. Mary. We had City Place, which is another name now in Palm Beach. So we were busy when we were going there. It wasn't like, oh, wow, we're not working. What are we doing?
Mm-hmm.
So it was interesting because if you feel like you're not enough or you've hit the ceiling creatively, you have the biggest people, you're working for the biggest people, Gloria and Amelia, you're making a boatload of money. Your mom is here. Everything is perfect. What are you doing? What are you doing? It was the hardest thing I ever did, to leave everything that I loved, So getting to LA, becoming a member of Women in Film, becoming a member of the AFM group, becoming a member of WGA, it's a different machine and a different animal. If you go to LA, there's 50,000 screenwriters there.
Mm-hmm.
There's only about 3,000 working. If you just go there, you made it. So you don't have to necessarily get the deal done to make it. What you've made is that you transform yourself to another place, to be in the moment of it, to understand it, to sit in the room with Aaron Sorkin and pitch Aaron Sorkin a show. It's scary. Or to be at a top agency to get representation for a project that is a Florida story. That was the crazy thing. I left Miami, brought all these Florida stories, went and pitched Florida stories to get deals done from LA to make them in Florida. So that's how it works. If all the executives and the networks are there and the developers are there, and you want to be in television or theatrical, you have to be able to, at a dime, jump in and, oh yeah, she's got a project. I met with her. Oh, great. Do you think you could give her my number? I'd like to hear that because we're looking for a Miami story right now. And that's how it worked. So besides keeping Walker Fitzgibbon TV film alive, shooting, working on music videos there, commercials, a documentary, the same thing, and going back and forth to Miami, working there. And we did that all the way up through about, let's see, it was 2015, back and forth, working 50-50. And there was just a part of me that felt like I had to do it. And it was wonderful, but it's daunting.
And now how long were you out in California?
We lived there for 16 years.
Okay. But now you're back.
Yes, we are back. We're in Vero Beach, beautiful Vero Beach. Well, here's the deal. I thought I've got to get the heck out of LA. I love LA, but the homelessness was getting a little too much for me. When you go to Florida and you land and you come out of the airport, it's beautiful. There's flowers at every medium. There's no litter. There's not homeless sitting right at the corner. And I said to myself, wow, I love LA and I love the business and I love all the connections, but the pandemic happened for 2 years and everybody's on Zoom now and all the meetings and the pitches are on Zoom and you don't have to be here anymore. I mean, you still have to get on the plane and take the meeting if you get past the 4 or 5 Zoom calls. That took about 8 months to get, So, what does it really matter? My daughter is 18. I wanted her to come home. She was born here. I wanted her to flourish like we did. I wanted her to have the dreams where she could make them happen and be a Florida girl, Florida college. So she's at FAU studying both music and business. And we landed here. It's 10 degrees cooler, by the way, in Vero Beach. I don't know if you knew that. And I'm literally just going up and down the coast, seeing everybody. and landing and still working.
And since you've been back in Florida, you joined Film Florida, which we obviously greatly appreciate. You've taken a really active role with a few film festivals. You continue to mentor people. At this point in your career, what gives you satisfaction?
What satisfies me is to be able to take all this knowledge that I have now, everything that I know, from the girl that started as a production coordinator, went on to line produce, work with big directors, become a director, be credited in network television, have my name on the backs of album covers or DVD covers, or even feature films for that matter, seeing the evolution of myself, also screenwriting, development, which is the thing that really drives me. I have folks who collab and say, hey, I need you to come in, work with me on this. We'll sit down for, 3 months, flush out a script, flush out a character breakdown. These are the things that I learned, that you learn in a place where that environment is in front of you. And it's very hard. It's very hard, A, to go pen to paper, B, to get funded. We see all these amazing Florida independent production companies making these movies, and I look at them. I can't believe how amazing that they were able to do it. When we go to Hollywood and we go to the distributor and we get rights and we get 250,000 and we get this, we still can't get it done, even if we play it right. So you have to beg, borrow, and steal and hobble it all together and hope. And so that's why I feel everything I know now, everything I learned there, everything I learned as a young business person in a community, in a market that has to always fight for everything that they get. I made it, and you can too. And I think with all the fantastic young future filmmakers that we have, we need more people that's been there, done that, that we can just say, hey, been there, done that. Here's a few things I'd like to share with you. If you want to write that movie, pen to paper, then you have to say, okay, you wrote that. That was great. But really, the first question is, who's going to watch my movie? Who's going to buy my movie? What channel would develop this movie? What showrunner will the network approve to run that show that you're not going to run, even though you created it? So there's all these things, and it still keeps me up at night. So I thought, well, I'll just continue to do that. I'm writing a book with a former police detective in Miami because I love crime stories of Miami in the 80s. I was very thrilled to find a property, an intellectual property that I developed as a film, that I got done as a documentary on Investigation Discovery Channel, that, I've got Esai Morales interested in, I've got a director interested, and this has been going on for years now. Not like I have 20 versions, and now we're going to write the book. Okay. So we go from all these formats. That's the wonderful thing about what we do. We can write, we can develop, we could do it for ourselves. We could bring it over to somebody else to look at. We can get people attached. We can go and sit down with our big wealthy friends and say, hey, I want to make a movie. You want to make a movie with me? We can make a movie. Well, how much do you need? Well, I need 10 million. You're like, what? So it's all of that. And I think for me now, writing the book, working with former detective Placencia on this, who was one of the main investigators on crimes of the 80s in Miami. This is the whole cocaine cowboy era, Centac 26. It has so many legs that I think it's too many. But the book is interesting now because we've been able to write it fictionally through the eyes of Detective Jay Perez, who in the timeline of the 80s is nothing like what we see today in crime stories with technology. So that makes it really cool. So yeah, chapter 47, 20 more to go.
Mo, you mentioned the investigation discovery stuff that you worked on. It's a little bit of a niche market, but it's a huge market. Talk about your work that you did there.
Crazy story. before I moved to California, one of the things that was driving me was this true story, the true story of the Miami River Cops. Something I'm not proud of, but I basically lived the life. Okay. I was definitely in Miami in the late 70s, Saturday Night Fever, Scarface, all of it. I was right there. So I was very fascinated by it all. And in somewhere in the late, I don't know, well, way into my career, I thought, oh gosh, I want to make a movie. Let me find the story that, I really want to make a movie on. And it was the River Cops, the true story of the River Cops. So I collaborated with all the detectives who cracked the case, and I wrote a treatment. The treatment was written. I hired a writer in LA. This is 2004, literally. I'm not kidding. This is how long these things take. When you hear the story about, oh, it took me 15 years to make a movie, that is all true. But that was the thing. So I go out to LA, I'm meeting with people, I'm talking about this great film idea. I only have a treatment, and they're looking at me like, who is this girl? Is she nuts? She's like, doesn't have any credits in films. She's going off about this thing that I don't even know. She doesn't have any money, but that's the thing about fear and having no fear.
Mm-hmm.
So we got close. We had talks with CAA, a couple of showrunners there, and then we had a writer strike, and that went south. So I started reaching out to people in the documentary world because I had the treatment, I had a sizzle reel, I had everything, I had rights, had it all. And sure enough, I get a call from a guy named Steve Peterson, who's a well-known director who just took home Best Foreign Short at the Fort Lauderdale Film Festival for Viva. He said, I have a chance to do 3 investigation discovery crime stories of the 80s, and I want to bring River Cops to light. Can you meet with us? Well, Steve Peterson is from Miami. So he is another one that moved out there to get it done. So here I am with a Miami boy in LA. He gets 3 green lights for 3 1 hours. He's reaching out to me for River Cops in LA. We're both in LA. And they brought me in for that. I cried because I had already been in it for 6 or 7 years. And finally, I saw it on TV. It got a 77 share. That is so high in television, in linear television, a 77 share. Oh my God, on a Wednesday night on ID channel. And I thought, this is it. This is going to get the movie done. And of course, that did not get the movie done. But what it did do is it gave me more things to talk about, more publicity on the story, more things to show actors that they could wrap their head around. We cut that thing down, and I was able then to go forward after I made the documentary and I began writing the script in 2014, which was so odd because when I look back at how I came to love the project just as a treatment early on, and there I got it done as a documentary. You just never know. And I always say, well, maybe that's all it's supposed to be. Why? Because it's a true crime story, and crime stories are based on truth. And whereas a movie, if you have too many characters, they want to get rid of them. They want to change who they are. They want to fictionalize them. The truth doesn't become the truth anymore. It gets fictionalized to a degree where everybody is sort of trying to make up new B and C stories wrapped around the A guys. It didn't really happen. And so when everybody's coming in, taking your little thing that you have, basically the little red hen, who baked the bread. It's the same thing. They bake the bread, they get the seeds, they plant it, and everybody wants a piece of this pie. And you just have to go, okay, let's do it. But it was the documentary that really made me feel like I achieved it. And I'm in it. I don't know if you know it, but I'm actually in it. I'm in it talking about through the eyes of a journalist. It is on YouTube. You can see me on YouTube. I don't like the way I look, of course. It's like women, we have such an issue with that. Oh my God, it's not good enough. Yeah. So that was pretty cool.
So Mo, what are you currently working on? Anything you can share?
At this time, we're in production on a series of gun violence educational videos, vignettes for classroom, in-person classroom learning, for the e-channels as well. And they are vignettes produced in animation with Happy Trails Animation in conjunction with Walker Fitzgibbon and Walker Sound on how to show in such a manner without creating fear in a video to high school students and elementary kids and kindergarten on basically how to run and hide.
Mm.
And these videos, the high school version is set in a high school with teenagers talking about, being aware, looking around. It's all done in animation. It looks like literally a series, an animated series is how they've been produced. And of course, we provided all of the audio, the sound design, the composition for the music, all the casting on the talent right here in Florida, right here in Vero Beach, the king and queen, Rob and Mo show. We got it together and we stepped in. It's so rewarding to be able to take our knowledge and bring it to something like this that's going to hopefully fix, change, inform, or make kids more aware, see something, say something. So these videos, we've done high school, elementary, we're gearing up for disability and school bus, and each has a demographic for, I hate to say it, kids 4 years old up through 6. We just completed bunnies. It's a bunch of little bunnies, a bunny teacher, a bunny narrative, bunny kids, human kids. And it's a story about learning how to run and hide.
Yeah. It's obviously it's a tough subject, and I wish we didn't have to do those, but I think that the more that's information that's out there, the better to keep everybody safe these days.
Yeah. So we just wrapped up those 2. We're in completion now on a campaign, a regional campaign for an automotive dealership in Texas. So we have a business that we also have continued to have for over 30 years, which is automotive work. We do running car footage nationwide and also regionally for dealership and dealer groups. We're also known for a series of what we call editing commercials, post-productions, where the incentives change in the middle and the graphics all change. And we've been managing those clients and that business for years. So we just completed all the Christmas stuff and these videos. So we're still working. We're still developing, writing. I love film festivals, as you know. I'm all about standing with the community and just letting everybody know that in Florida, we've got everything and all that it takes to make those shows and those movies.
Yeah. And Mo, where can people follow you or your company and learn more about everything you got going on?
Well, I'm accessible on social media, Facebook, Mo Fitzgibbon, and you can just direct message me. I'll totally take your message and your call, and or Instagram at Mo Fitzgibbon Film. And IMDb Pro, I would recommend everybody get IMDb Pro, please, because then you can find out a lot of information on how to reach a lot of people directly, like me.
Well, Mo, thanks so much for sharing your expertise with us, being such a great Film Florida member. I really enjoyed your stories, and I appreciate you being on the Film Florida podcast today.
Thank you. It was fantastic. I'd love to come back anytime.
Thanks for listening to the Film Florida podcast. For more information about Film Florida, go to filmflorida.org or visit our social media pages on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. If you're not already a member of Film Florida, please consider joining at filmflorida.org. If you like what you hear on the podcast, please consider going to our website and donating $20.23 for our 2023 fundraising campaign. Check out the Film Florida merchandise at filmflorida.creator-spring.com, and please remember to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast.